In 1775, the world was a map of empires, ruled by kings. Across the Atlantic Ocean, 13 colonies were bound to the British crown, but beneath the surface of loyalty, a quiet fire was growing. It was a desire for freedom, for a new identity, for revolution. This is the story of how farmers became soldiers, how rebels became revolutionaries, and how a collection of colonies gave birth to a nation that would forever change the course of history. For decades, Britain's American colonies had thrived under the rule of King George III. But the price of maintaining an empire, especially after the costly French and Indian War, had left Britain drowning in debt. To recover its losses, Parliament decided the colonies would pay, imposing a wave of new taxes. In a Boston tavern in 1765, the air was thick with discontent. One colonist might have slammed his fist on the table, saying, "The Stamp Act. A tax on every document, every single piece of paper we use." Another would have stood, his voice rising with anger, "No taxation without representation. We have no voice in their parliament." The colonists' protests spread like wildfire. From the harbors of Massachusetts to the fields of Virginia, fiery orators like Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry fanned the flames, igniting a movement that refused to be silenced. Then, in 1770, the tension snapped. When British soldiers fired into a crowd in Boston, killing 5 colonists in what became known as the Boston Massacre, the message was clear. The fragile bond between the ruler and the ruled was breaking. By December 1773, the cold winds blowing over Boston Harbor carried a new tension. British ships, loaded with taxed tea, sat docked, waiting to be unloaded. To the Sons of Liberty, this wasn't just tea, it was a symbol of British arrogance, another reminder of their control. Under the cover of darkness, men disguised as Mohawk Indians prepared to act. Samuel Adams, a key figure in the resistance, might have whispered to his comrades, "Tonight, we show them that we will not bow." The sound of splashing echoed through the night as 342 chests of British tea were heaved into the dark, frigid waters. When news reached London, King George III was furious. In retaliation, he unleashed the coercive acts, shutting down Boston's port and tightening his grip on all the colonies. In a stern voiceover, you can almost hear him declaring, "They will submit, or they will be crushed." The fuse had been lit. By April 1775, the British were on the march. Their target, Concord, where colonial weapons were stockpiled. But the countryside was awake. The militias, the Minutemen, were waiting. At Lexington Green, as the dawn mist swirled around them, Captain John Parker told his men, "Stand your ground. Don't fire unless fired upon. But if they mean to have a war, let it begin here." A single musket shot shattered the morning quiet. To this day, no one knows who fired first. But history remembers it as the shot heard round the world. The American Revolution had begun. By June of 1775, the fighting had engulfed Boston. The colonies, realizing they needed to unite, formed a Continental Army. To lead it, they chose a tall, stoic Virginian named George Washington. In the sweltering summer of 1776, the Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia. The delegates gathered there, debated the unthinkable, a complete break from the mightiest empire on earth. A young Thomas Jefferson, quill in hand, drafted the words that would echo through the ages. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." A wise Benjamin Franklin, knowing the gravity of their actions, reportedly quipped, "Gentlemen, we must all hang together, or most assuredly, we shall all hang separately." On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was adopted. A new nation was born in spirit, if not yet in fact. The war raged on, and the years that followed were a desperate struggle for survival. Washington's army was poorly supplied, its soldiers often barefoot, cold, and hungry. During the brutal winter at Valley Forge, Washington wrote in his tent, "These men suffer, yet they do not yield. Their spirit shall be our victory." Across the sea, King George refused to bend, sending thousands more soldiers and hired mercenaries. But the tide began to turn when the Americans gained a powerful ally, France. French ships, soldiers, and money were a game-changer. The climax arrived in 1781. The British general, Charles Cornwallis, had fortified his army at Yorktown, Virginia, confident in his position. But Washington saw his chance. In a brilliant strategic move, he surrounded the British with a combined force of American and French troops, cutting off any escape. A worried Cornwallis realized his fate. "We are outnumbered, outgunned, outmaneuvered." Washington, calm and resolute, knew the end was near. "The end has come. My friend," he might have thought, "let us finish this." After weeks under relentless siege, Cornwallis surrendered. The British Empire was stunned. The colonies were victorious. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris officially ended the war. The United States of America was finally recognized as an independent nation, fragile and certain, but free. From France, Benjamin Franklin observed, "Gentlemen, the world is watching the birth of liberty. Let us prove worthy of it." In a final, powerful act, George Washington laid down his sword and returned to his farm. He was a man who could have been a king, but chose instead to be a citizen. The American Revolution was more than just a war for territory. It was a war for an idea, the radical idea that freedom is worth fighting for, that ordinary people can stand up to empires, and that a nation's greatest strength lies not in its power, but in its people.